Nancy Jo has been a Christian minister for nearly 53 years. She has served 6 congregations in as many states and was the executive director of the excuse me, tickle. She was the executive director of the Kentucky Council of Churches for 18 years. During that time and after, she also served as a minister of the New Union Christian Church, Disciples of Christ, in Woodford County until retiring in 2017. Since then, she has served 2 congregations as their interim minister. In 2016, she was the Democratic candidate for Kentucky's 6th congressional seat, running against incumbent Republican Andy Barr. A native of Lexington, Nancy Jo is a graduate of Transylvania University. They gave her an honorary degree in 2001, and Yale Divinity School, where she received the William Sloan Coffin Award for Peace and Justice in 2010. She is the mother of 2 daughters and a grandmother of 2 granddaughters. Please welcome Nancy Jo Kemper.
Whoa, I'm losing my technology, which I can't do without. I used to use paper, but now I've gone to, high-tech stuff. It is so good to be with you today, and I thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to meet you all and have this opportunity to gather. First, a sort of a caveat, which I think you already understand. I make no apologies for being a Christian, although one who most Christians, and certainly every evangelical and fundamentalist Christian I know, would call me a heretic. But I'm an heir to the tradition of the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, which began in these parts. And as such, I inherited from them a non-Trinitarian understanding of Christianity. I can't say that's true of most Christian churches anymore. They've sort of lost touch a bit with their heritage. Our movement arose at much the same time as Christian Unitarianism began to flourish in New England, and it came out of the same roots of the Enlightenment. But because the Disciples of Christ heritage, my own life has been grounded and guided a lot by Jewish scriptures, which I've chosen to use to point our way in our reflections today. All world religions recognize the importance of integrity and morality in our lives. And I could have chosen readings from other traditions. In fact, spent a good bit of time looking at the Quran and told my friend Atif Saeed, who's active in political things in Fayette County, that I enjoyed the opportunity to explore some verses in the Quran, but decided to go with what I knew best. So I hope you all understand, and that's why I chose the passages that I did. But there's another reason, and that is that these are the texts that are appointed in what's called a Revised Common Lectionary, a set of readings for a lot of churches across the globe. And this is the 6th Sunday in Epiphany, a liturgical season in the Christian tradition, and in cycle A. In about a week and a half, we come to Ash Wednesday. And these are amongst my favorite texts. The first is from 1 Corinthians, where Paul is fussing at the church there, who was all tied up about who's right and who's got the right message for everybody. And basically, people have succumbed to factions, the faction of Apollos, or the faction of Cephas, or the faction of Paul. But and I'm not going to address a lot of the detail of these words. I'm using this as a jumping off place, okay? So that's partly why I'm a heretic. The apostle writes, "What then is Apollos? What is Paul? Servants through whom you came to believe, as the Lord assigned to each. I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the growth. So neither the one who plants nor the one who waters is anything, but only God who gives the growth. The one who plants and the one who waters have a common purpose, and each will receive wages according to the labor of each. For we are God's servants working together. You are God's field, God's building. And then the reading from the gospel for this day is the last of 3 readings over the preceding 2 weeks and then today from Jesus' Sermon on the Mount in the Gospel of Matthew, from the 5th chapter, verses 21 through 37. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment." But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, "You fool," you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First, be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him, or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly, I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, "You shall not commit adultery." But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, "Whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce." But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife except on the ground of unchastity causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, "You shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord." But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is God's footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by the hair of your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. May we hear a sacred word this morning, and may my words and our reflections move us in the direction of hope and peace, truth and justice. Well, there have been examples of integrity very evident in recent days, as well as examples of lack of integrity, huh? We have Doug Collins of Alabama voting for the removal of the president from office, knowing that it may cost him his election, his re-election. We saw Mitt Romney stand alone as the only Republican to say that his sacred oath and his sense of right and wrong required him to vote for the president's removal. We have Lieutenant Colonel Vindman Marie Yovanovitch. On the other side, we have 45 and his sycophants, including the Attorney General William Barr. We know integrity when we see it. I watched a long movie on Friday about Franz Jagerstatter. I don't know if any of you have seen it. It's called A Hidden Life. It only had 3 showings at the Kentucky because it's a 3-hour movie and it's been kind of panned by the reviewers, but it's worth seeing if you get a chance. Franz Jagerstatter was an Austrian farmer who refused to swear an oath of loyalty to Hitler, which was an act that cost him his life and his family much persecution for his stand. At the end of the movie, from whence cometh the title of the film. On a black screen, there are these words that you might know from George Eliot's novel Middlemarch. Eliot wrote, oh shoot, come on, computer. Anyway, George Eliot wrote, I just touched it at the wrong place, you know. But Eliot wrote, for the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. And that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. Well, Jagerstatter has since been beatified for his martyrdom by the Roman Catholic Church, and so his life is not quite as hidden as it once was. But you and I know lots of people who lived basically good, decent, honorable, honest lives in their jobs, in their relationships with family, carrying out their responsibilities, and live faithful lives, and live and died and are in unvisited tombs. While we may know integrity by certain actions of people when we see it, we really don't always know if a person has integrity or is lacking it. Most of the people we associate with know whether they can trust us or not, right? Yeah. We can be pretty sure, I think, that, I'm about to say a political thing, our current president is lacking in virtue, character, and integrity. You think? Mostly, however, integrity or its absence is hidden. Even our close associates may not know whether and in what circumstances we are trustworthy. We may not even know that about ourselves. Jagerstatter, for example, was repeatedly told that his refusal to swear his fealty to Hitler would accomplish nothing, and it didn't. He was a nobody to most of the world, except a handful of people in his village, most of whom did not respect him for his act. George Eliot was prescient in believing that things are not so terrible with us as they might be, as at least half due to the lives of those who have lived with integrity so far as they could, as long as they lived. And thankfully, there are more of them than we see. Happy are those whose way is blameless, says the psalmist. Well, unfortunately, I don't believe in the idea of original sin, that we're born sinners, but I do not think that anybody is able to live blamelessly throughout this life. We are, as the Apostle Paul implies in 2 Corinthians, I'll quote our president, more likely to be cracked pots. Interesting, you told the story of the empty pot. You know, we're people who make mistakes, who cause harm that we didn't mean to cause, who do not do the good we wish to do, and fail often to wish the good in the first place. Nonetheless, most of us are cognizant of the cracks. We try to patch them up and then work harder to live up to our own moral and relational standards. Maya Angelou once wrote, "Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better." You know? Thus, we have within us the capacity of living lives of integrity, which is, I think, the will to live according to one's sense of duty, to do what is good, what is fair to others, what's just and honest and decent, in the sense that one can have empathy with others and so want to treat others as one wants to be treated, which is, of course, at the heart of all the moral codes of most of the world's religions, everyone that I know of. Happy are those whose way is the life of integrity, is another way to translate what the psalmist says, who are able to keep values and thoughts, words and deeds consistent and coherent with one another, Indeed, to be happy, I think, is to feel coherent, undivided in oneself, complete. And integrity literally means wholeness or completeness. Consistency and predictability are crucial to integrity. In other words, a person with integrity is one whom we can predict will behave morally, or as the Bible would put it, righteously, in almost every circumstance, and who will consistently at least try to do the right thing. If they've made a mistake, will confess it and apologize. Horace Mann, the great promoter of free public education, believed that public schools should exist to help children become active and moral citizens. Now we educate children to master skills necessary to earn a living. And we're witnessing the collapse of a world where virtue and integrity once had more value than money or success. More children used to be active in scouting with its oath, "On my honor, I promise to do my duty to God and my country." Whereas now they're much more involved in athletic events where the emphasis is on winning and skill than on honor and duty. Colleen McCullough, in her novel, 1981 novel, An Indecent Obsession, ends her book by saying, it's the only line I ever remember from this author, "Duty, the most indecent of all obsessions, is only another name for love." Duty is only another name for love. The unhappiest people I know are those who never are willing to accept that they might have a duty, a responsibility to something or someone beyond themselves. Or they are unhappy because they seldom see themselves to blame for some aspect of their own situation in life. As the trite saying goes, those all wrapped up in themselves make a pretty small package. Healthy personalities experience guilt and perhaps momentary shame and are willing to face their responsibility for whatever difficulties they're in, rather than placing total blame outside oneself. If you get divorced, to go to that issue that Jesus spoke about in such difficult ways, at least you've got to admit that you were partly to blame. There's rarely in my pastoral counseling have I ever encountered a situation where it wasn't a matter of two people having problems and not just one being to blame. Most of us, I think, also know that our lives are not determined as much by outward circumstances as by our own choices and response to situations in which we find ourselves. A fundamental honesty about self underlies the virtue of humility, and that humility instills a sense that to judge others is to submit myself to judgment. To live with integrity, then, is to live in accord with the basic moral code that's expressed by most religions, to do unto others as one would have others do unto you, which psychologically speaking is to have empathy, to be able to put yourself in their shoes. It's to love God or that which is sacred and one's neighbor as one loves oneself. Religious laws were identified to reflect not just a law that would please some all-powerful God, but also meant the greatest benefit or good to the greatest number of people for the longest period of time. Even the food codes and cleanliness rules in Leviticus have more to do with social well-being than maintaining some religious purity to please a God. For Paul, the message to the Corinthians is that they must quit expecting some preacher to give them the answer about how they're to live, about what is right and what is wrong, and to grow up and understand they are responsible. Not some Apollos or Cephas or Paul, but they are able to respond, responsible to the place where the fruits of God's Spirit might grow. Stephen Carter, I've given you a little handout, the law professor and ethicist and novelist on important issues of civility and integrity, says in a book entitled Integrity that it involves three essential parts, and I've printed them out for you there. I won't read them entirely, except to note that the discernment of what is right and wrong is not a reacting just from habit or an initial emotion. It's moral reflectiveness. 2, acting on what you've discerned is part of integrity, even at personal cost. And 3, saying openly in public and acting on your understanding of right from wrong is the third part of integrity. You can't just, for example, say you disagree, as you were talking about. You can't just be an advocate. You've got to do a little bit more. You know, that you disagree with what your government's doing, so you're going to cheat on your taxes rather than refuse to pay them and pay the consequences. The verses we heard from the Gospel of Matthew and the Sermon on the Mount are labeled antitheses. Jesus posits the thesis from the Jewish tradition, you have heard that it was said, with his own antithetical. But I say to you, there are actually 6 of them, that the 4 we read from today are part of, as I said, these appointed readings, and I'm not going to chase into the weeds after each one. They're difficult. But what they represent are the process of moral discernment that Carter outlines in that first step. Understanding the initial principle, thou shalt not murder, leads one to deeper reflection that even anger and judgment and alienation may also be forms of killing, and are thereby lacking integrity and decency. One of my New Testament professors at Yale, the late Paul Minear, wrote about these sticky new commandments of Jesus. No longer do the teachings on murder and adultery apply strictly to the acts of murder and adultery. Instead, they become doorways into the examination of many internal dynamics as well as external behaviors in one's life. Anger, derision, slander, false generosity, litigiousness, arrogance, lust, temptation, alienation. All 4 can be embraced in one message if one remembers not only these 4, but all 6 in the Sermon on the Mount focus on a common theme, which is the primary importance of personal relationships and living in those honestly and with fairness. What we aim for as moral and religious persons is to break through the limitations of our excuses and to live lives of commitment to integrity. Integrity refuses to treat any person as less than human. Integrity requires us to set aside other gods that appeal to our loyalty, gods of popularity or material wealth or power, for a commitment to integrity, to honesty, and compassion, and justice. To live with integrity requires daily that the ends, no matter how worthy they might seem in your own mind, say your own reelection to office, and here I have in mind not just the one who sits in the White House, but the guy I ran against for Congress, can never justify the use of any illicit and dishonorable means, no matter what Mr. Trump's defense attorneys might have said in the U.S. Senate. We had long debates in my campaign about what was fair and what we could say and not say in our campaign literature. An old pilgrim was making his way to the Himalayan mountains in a bitter cold winter when it began to rain. The innkeeper said to him, "How will you ever get there in this kind of weather, my good man?" And the pilgrim answered cheerfully, "My heart goes there first." You know? So it's easy for the rest of me to follow. I believe that one of the primary mistakes made by too many Christians and religious people is to suppose that God is chiefly interested in religion, in what we believe, in our little day-to-day opinions. The God I worship is not interested in religion. My God's interested in human beings, in our relationships with one another, and in our relationship to the things that are sacred, that transform our lives, that move us to beauty and goodness. In this Valentine's season, I hope we'll let our hearts lead us to live with one another and ourselves in integrity, with unity of heart and mind and words and deeds. So may we aspire to live and walk with integrity. Amen. Anything else you want to do? Thank you very much. You're welcome.